Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first look at the Sony Alpha A7 Mark II, priced at $16.99 for the body alone and $2,000 for the kit I'm about to unbox. This is Sony's second generation full-frame mirrorless interchangeable lens camera based around the E-mount, of course the successor to the original A7 that I reviewed, which in my opinion was a game-changing product, and the Mark II, quite frankly, is no different. It brings some features as well as enhancements to the overall package, and mind you, this is the beginning of the revamp of the second gen of the A7 line because, of course, we have an A7, an A7R, as well as an A7S. So look for these sort of enhancements to be carried over to each and every arm or branch of the new lineup of cameras that Sony releases over the course of 2015. But starting here with what I do have to share with all of you, let's take a look at the box. We've got the same 24 megapixel sensor that we did in the original A7, some fine-tuning as well as software enhancements that have come into play, a bit of a redesign on the product itself, which I'll show you side by side with my A7R that I have right here next to it, because they have made some, I would say, critical design cue changes, and most of those, by the way, are responses in, I would say, the most part to consumer critique or criticism. Sony has gotten very good in the past few years at listening to what customers are actually interested in their DI, at least, business. And you can see that come shining through in the actual products that end up hitting shelves. So right here, just a quick rundown of some specifications. I'm going to zoom in and then get this thing out of the box for those of you that, of course, are patiently waiting. Full frame 24.3 megapixel sensor. I mentioned that. It is the same one from the original A7. Your ISO range right there. Fast hybrid autofocus. This does utilize both contrast as well as phase. Same exact amount of points as the original A7. Key difference is the actual performance because it does borrow the algorithms from the A6000. So even though it doesn't have that same incredible autofocus speed, it does promise a 30% improvement in actual autofocus and 50% better tracking, or improvement rather, in tracking on that autofocus. So that's big already, and that's just borrowing the algorithm from the A6000. So while we don't have the A6000's autofocus system, we have at least the software side of things. But the big thing, the critical thing, is that 5-axis steady shot inside. Now, this is the first E-mount camera to have stabilization in body. Every previous E-mount camera basically relied on lens stabilization. This is not only critical in terms of making lens lighter, smaller, but also critical for third-party glass. If you want to use Canon, Nikon, any manufacturer's glass, which has always been a big selling point for E-mount cameras, you now have probably the best solution that Sony could have ever made. Essentially a dream come true in that regard. No 4K video here. We do still have a great OLED-based EVF, which I know is going to be a pleasure to use. They've also upped the dot count on the rear display. No 4K I just mentioned, but we do have xavc-s, so we do have higher quality video. Of course, 4K output. This does have Wi-Fi, NFC, and is driven by the Bionz X processor. So let me get this thing out of the box. You can see a little bit of the styrofoam here from shipping still making its way into the video. New accessories, by the way. The battery's still the same, but they have changed the vertical grip. You can notice right there we've got a new one, so the original one is not going to work with this. This is part of the new body change, which you're going to see right now. So hopefully that just gave you a good rundown of essentially key differences between this and the original A7. You can see we've got the typical software right out of the gate that you expect to see as soon as you open up any new product, but especially a Sony. Our warranty, which is accompanied by basically an accessory guide as well as some manual paperwork, which I'm going to go ahead and put aside. And let's get to the camera itself. You can see we've got the kit lens right here, which I'm going to leave for now. But I want to get the body out. Oh, you can feel the weight immediately. By the way, big change, a big enhancement. I mentioned the redesign of the camera is the actual magnesium alloy body. And also, the lens mount itself is now made of stainless, I believe. So a complete design change in terms of the fabric, the actual quality, material build that Sony has chose to go with the brand new or the new generation of the A7s. You can see we've got a wrist strap there. I will take out the lens now, why not? The lens right here is the same exact kit lens that they launched with the A7, so there's not a whole lot to show with regard to that. Of course, it does come with an actual lens hood, and it is an underrated lens. I will tell you that for those of you that are curious about performance when compared, nothing else there, when compared to, I would say, the Zeiss 24-70 that I have, it is competent, believe it or not. Just want to get to the balance of accessories and then finally share with all of you the camera itself. Got the charger there. So the lens strap actually, I'll move the box out of the way now because it is totally empty. So they actually do provide a decent lens strap, but this is not surprising. I mean, this is a $1,700 body. That should be a given. The lenses I mentioned before, this is not a prime lens, but for a zoom lens, it's going to be fine. I've reviewed it. If you want to check out reviews of that, go ahead and do so. Battery has stayed exactly the same. Kind of shocking considering that Sony has changed just about everything else, including, look at the power adapter. Anyone who's purchased one of these cameras in the past knows that the power adapter is generally nowhere near this size nor this actual design form. So a big change to see Sony all of a sudden just using something that is completely different. Something changed in manufacturing, even if it's something small. Not going to put that away. And then, of course, the actual USB cable for transfer. It is a micro cable. This will charge the camera on body, the battery rather. And finally, last but not least, here we have it. Now, I mentioned the weight gain. You can see immediately we have principal design change as well. Up at the top, the shutter button is now here on the extended grip. This grip did not exist in the past. I'll show you right now in the background the A7R. I'll even put them side by side, and you'll immediately see the difference here that I'm talking about. I'm going to get in a little bit tighter. The A7R, completely different. Some would liken it more to a Leica experience. A lot of people did not like the placement of the shutter button on the R. They felt it would have been better suited to have been on the grip. Sony responded by doing exactly that. Now, part of getting this heavier, I would say, I won't say better constructed body, but beefier, to say the least, being that it is roughly 5 ounces heavier. Part of that is to deal with the 5-axis image stabilization, that shift stabilization that's just unmatched, groundbreaking material in the DI business for both still and video. Sony says 4 stops, but the reality is that it's going to do a lot more than that, depending on what type of glass you want to use, and it really just breaks down all the walls. And there's no other camera that has this sort of capability. Olympus and Pentax, both very close, but not the same capability of the new Mark II. You can see a redesign of the top right here. In terms of the programmable buttons, they've added quite a bit more. I think 2 more here in the Mark II. And basically, to me, the grip is a critical thing because anyone who's used the original A7 line, at least for professional or even amateur use, the larger the lenses get, the more you need that grip. And Sony realized that the form is essential. I mean, the whole E-mount is pitched around its form factor, yet basically zero compromise on image and video quality. But at the same time, Sony had to sort of give you that pro feel that the camera was still missing, at least for many other users. Now, I was perfectly happy with the form, the design, everything here on the original A7, A7R, and A7S. But there were so many users that understandably wanted more bulk, something a little bit heavier to carry, something more solid. This camera is still weather sealed, just like the original, but boy, as soon as you pick it up, you feel like you're back in, I won't say digital SLR land, but you're getting closer. And I think that's clearly intentional. I mean, the thickness, it's got to be 3-4 millimeters more than the body of the original A7 line. And, the shutter button takes its cue directly from the A6000. For those of you that haven't seen my coverage of the A6000, there you have it right there. And you can see nothing new. They put the shutter button right there. So essentially a natural transition to now do that with the Mark II. And this is what I like about Sony, is that they keep basically listening to customer feedback and then applying it in the actual products they manufacture. So you can see we've got these customizable buttons now, which were never at the top, a completely different, I would say, cleaner look. That sanded, brushed aluminum sort of finish on the camera, which should come through in the 4K video that I'm capturing. Exposure comp dial, your modes, your hot shoe, your microphone right there, and basically what should be, or I believe will be, one of the best EVFs you're going to find on a camera. As I flip it to the backside, we've got that 3-inch display, same level of articulation, a little bit thinner, a little bit higher dot count, I believe over 1 million now, as opposed to the 921,000 employed in the previous gen. Still no self-portrait capability, but that's not who this camera is designed for, really, at the end of the day. Button layout here, very similar. Again, just to give you a side-by-side so that you can see that. The A7R down here at the bottom, A7 Mark II at the top, and you can see that the customizable buttons have changed. Not only the number of them, but the placement as well. And also, the actual dials we have, I'm speaking directly of these right here, these two. You can see originally on the R, we had that brushed aluminum dial. That's been ditched for a plastic dial, and we also now have a customizable front dial, which I think everyone always wished was there. At least when I say there, I mean in terms of position, because we did have that on the original A7 series. I personally already can tell you I prefer the metal design to the plastic, but the overall ergonomic advancement, the improvement that the Mark II brings, I think overall is really far more important than whether or not I prefer the feel of the plastic dials they've incorporated. By the way, they're really smooth, they are tight, so they don't feel like plastic junk, if that's what you're concerned about. Everything about this camera speaks to build quality, and I think Sony wanted to make sure of that, because the original A7 was lightweight and a lot of people felt it was a little too light. They're not going to feel that way about this camera. Now, the 24 megapixel sensor I mentioned before is the same, but we have a different shutter. It's a little bit more quiet. I'm going to see if I can actually fire it off for you. But going around the body, more importantly, in terms of design cue changes, even more that you'll notice, the SD card slot door is not half the size, but maybe 30% smaller. Record for video button still in the exact same location. Your battery bay down at the bottom right there. And Sony's saying 350 shots of battery life, as opposed to the 340 with the A7 line, so an improvement there. Another material design change. Instead of the doors that we had here in the original A7, we now have side-by-side doors, rather, that do not take up the entire height of the camera or the full body. And some will prefer this, some will not. I think, this is mostly a reaction or response. Again, Sony listening to customers and what they require. And I think when Sony saw basically how the A7 ended up getting used at a professional level, being mounted with rigs and systems, all of these design cues are really about taking on higher-end glass, bigger glass, whether you're handheld or not. If you're setting up with a rig, doing so more comfortably, more practically, this is really speaks to all the polish, the fine detail you need if you're taking your system to the next level. And that's what Sony seems to have done with the Mark II, and I really like that. Now, the biggest improvement on this camera is, without any hesitation, in my opinion, that 5-axis stabilization. And that means that any lens now can theoretically have image stabilization, at least 3-axis stabilization. So if you're working with Sony's present lenses, whether we're talking about Alpha or E-mount glass, it will work no problem, essentially. If you're using Sony's own adapter with A-mount lenses, you're going to get the 5-axis. If you're using any other Sony E-mount lens, like the Zeiss I have right here, or the kit lens that came with this, which some will argue isn't as good, but the price to performance difference isn't basically justifiable. All of those lenses, every E-mount lens, is going to natively be able to take on the 5-axis stabilization. When it comes to third-party glass, it's a matter of what your adapter will communicate with the Mark II. So if it can deliver both focal and length distance to the camera electronically, this is going to also be based on the pin layout basically, then you're going to be able to take advantage of the complete 5-axis image stabilization system. However, if your adapter does not deliver all of that information, then you're going to be stuck, or I shouldn't say stuck, but left with, I believe, at the very worst, 3-axis, which is still amazing because now all of a sudden you have stabilization on lenses that you never had before. So basically what Sony has done has taken, in my opinion here, a great 24 megapixel sensor that was already in a fantastic body, basically what you're looking at right there, and head to toe retooled it, redesigned it, put in stabilization that we have not seen, I already mentioned, except from the likes of Pentax and Olympus, but they simply do not have a model to match this full frame, go toe-to-toe, head-to-head, whatever you want to say. And the grip now, this is a grip that I think is going to make everybody happy. And the button placement, the shutter button, I know these sound like simple improvements that don't mean a lot, but to someone who has to use this camera professionally, or again, just even at the hobby level, this is huge. I mean, I do like the material design on the R, but there's no question which is more natural. It's the Mark II. Also, when I'm shooting with something like my 70-200, I'm not going to feel as, I won't say worried, because I was never worried, but I'll feel a little bit more comfortable putting more weight on the body, knowing that the body is now 5 ounces heavier, full magnesium alloy, and has more grip to actually hang on to when shooting with something like the FE native E-mount full frame 70-200G glass. And that's something that Sony is planning for down the road. Also, putting the stabilization in body, which is something that's always been around in Sony's A-mount, but never in the E-mount. This is like taboo for the E-mount, frankly, and that's why it's so cool, besides the fact that Nikon and Canon users can now basically have a party, as well as any owner of any legacy lens for that matter, whatever you want to throw on it, which has always been Sony's goal. And that's why this is really the embodiment of the entire E-mount. I think where it started out was getting everybody on board with the fact that they could put any piece of glass they wanted on a camera like this. And now Sony, with their stabilization, has really made it possible, since adapters are readily available. I mean, third-party glass is even out there. But remember, again, stabilization is going to vary lens to lens. But the point being is that Sony has improved every single element of this camera. So some will think that, oh, it got larger, it defeats the purpose. But guess what? Now that the stabilization is in body, which is what I was getting to, the lenses can actually get smaller. And for those of you that have been complaining about not getting faster glass, maybe this is part of the plan. Now that stabilization is in body, maybe lenses that are faster can get smaller physically, because really everything is going on inside this body now. So some critical enhancements. Of course, there are other software side enhancements, better low light performance, noise reduction. I mentioned the autofocus improvement. And those are big things. The 4 steps, though, with the stabilization is certainly the biggest. And every photographer, I don't care if you're, video, still, a combination, this is huge for both ends of the spectrum. And being able to add stabilization to any piece of glass on Earth is something you just can't do any other way other than what you're looking at right here in the full frame world, that is. So again, we've seen an evolution. The original A7 line right here. This is the R again, but for at least our purposes, the same. And basically, these two cameras merging in order to deliver the latest Mark II, which, again, just really excited. I didn't intend for this quick unboxing to end up being almost 20 minutes long, but this Mark II is setting the foundation for a whole lineup of fantastic cameras, and this is only the beginning. Now, from what's rumored, most of them will not have 4K on board. They will have a 4K capture capability, going out of the camera, which disappoints me a little bit. But still, these are still cameras, not to be cute, and we have to remember that. So from a still vantage point, also with great video now that we do have 50 megabit per second xavc-s, just like on a lot of other Sony flagship DI products, we've got a whole new weapon in the arsenal. So this is, without question now, one of the most affordable, flexible, and powerful full-frame mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras ever made. Kudos to Sony. This was only an unboxing, but I know what to expect. I've seen samples, I've seen results, I've played with it before, and again, just excited to share it with all of you. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.